And if you're joining us for the first time, this is a little bit of a unique venue, right? The past couple of events have been maybe a touch more formal. And tonight, we're kicking it back. We've got these comfy couches for all, not just for the speakers. Sometimes it's just for the speakers. Comfy couches for all. We also have some beer and wine and other alcohol flowing, so we know the conversation is going to be good. I'm so excited to be here. My name's Katie, and I'm honored to be the MC for this evening's event, which is brought to you by the Spark Center, which I'm very proud to be a member of. I have my office space there. I'm running an event company. And also a girl empowerment movement. So love the work that the Spark Center is doing. It's an honor to be part of it. Wanted to shout out the president and CEO of the Spark Center is here tonight, Ms. Sherry Colburn. Also shout out to the Spark team. Wave where you are. Spark team helping out, making things run. Love it. Yes. And shout out to Bob, who's going to play us a song on the piano. No. It looks like you're ready to. Who's like typically the MC, does such a great job, so much work at the Spark Center, and who also is running the tech tonight. So big round of applause for Bob. Thanks, Bob. So we have an amazing, lovely lady to interview this evening, and just even getting a chance to talk to her on the phone beforehand and a little bit tonight. I know we're all in for a treat. Here to learn lots. So the format for this evening is essentially the beginning part. I get to ask some questions for about a half an hour, get to know Lindsey a little bit better, and then we're going to open up the floor. So if anybody has any questions, anything you'd like to know, we can do that at that time. Now I want to get a sense of the room before we kind of go any further, just to give us a sense of who's here tonight. So who here is an entrepreneur? All right. Who here is an aspiring entrepreneur? Who here is a student? Who here supports entrepreneurs with the work that they do? Oh, look at, wow, feel so supported already. Okay, and who here just walked in off the street? You are also welcome. Hi. Awesome. Well, you're very welcome. And this month in particular for May is recognized as Women's Month. So one of the hashtags that's kind of being promoted through the Startup Grind community is hashtag SGWomen. So that's one of the hashtags for tonight. We also have Spark Center. So if you want to tag any of your photos or videos from tonight, at Spark_Center. Don't forget the underscore. Spark_Center. Spark_Center, yes. And the other main hashtag, ready for this? Startup Grind Durham Region. That's all one hashtag. Hashtag Startup Grind Durham Region. Say that 10 times fast. Tagging in all your photos. Okay, very important stuff. And one of the things that we wanted to talk about just briefly before I introduce our main speaker tonight is this idea of women, and we are talking about that. May is recognized as Startup Grind Month for Women. Out of the STEM acronym, Science, Technology, Engineering, Mathematics, which we're so excited about encouraging more females to get involved in. Technology, that T, is the only sector experiencing a decline in female employment, even though that sector is like really on the rise. So kind of an interesting stat for this evening. But one thing that I did want to say is that even chatting with Lindsey, her and I in advance, while we love supporting women-focused months, we really are passionate about celebrating just achievement and merit regardless of gender, right? And every month is everybody's month. But still excited to recognize that tonight. So this evening, I have the great pleasure of interviewing and getting to know Lindsey Goodchild, and she is the CEO of Nudge Rewards and CEO and co-founder of Nudge Rewards, a mobile solution that allows retailers to better communicate and engage with store employees. So really excited. Please give Lindsey a warm welcome. Oh yeah, we got some whistles. So I gave a brief example of what Nudge is all about, a brief sample. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about this amazing company that you've started?
Sure. First of all, great to be here. I was actually born in Oshawa, grew up in Whitby. I came to Riley's when it was like first opening 10 years ago for opening week. So it's really funny to be back here today and sharing what I hope is an interesting story with all of you. So I started Nudge about 5 years ago. I was actually consulting full-time, working in hospitality and retail, so working with big ski resorts, restaurants, restaurant chains, retailers, and we were building these big change management plans for these companies. And the challenge was that as we built these plans, we had no way to actually activate them with the whole team in a company. You know, we'd engage with the executives, we'd engage with the managers, but really, to bring anything to life in retail or restaurant or hospitality, you need to have your front line in the know with what you're doing. So that was a huge gap, and those employees didn't have access to computers, they don't have access to email addresses often, so I wanted to build mobile software that employees could use every day when they show up to work to figure out what's going on and help them basically understand how to be their best every day. So we've built this mobile solution that employees download on their own personal device, and then when they show up for a shift, they'll open Nudge and see what they've been nudged on for the day. As they take different actions, we actually measure their performance in real time. So we're working with customers across Canada, the US, and the UK. Our smallest customer is probably Gulftown, and our biggest customer is Compass Group, and they have 500,000 frontline employees. So kind of the range of like 1,000 employees to 500,000 employees. Based in Toronto, started the company with 2 other people. Now we're 30. Moved into my new office yesterday, which is like our own office, which is like super crazy, and there was a bunch of things that went a little awry yesterday, and I was talking to Katie about those, like
Missing a front door?
Missing a front door, forgot to order desks, like, you know, like there's a few things I have to sort out.
It's team building, right? Everybody on the floor, everybody on the floor.
Yeah.
So what does the Nudge app look like? Like, give us a sense, if we were to sort of log in, what does the software look like? What would be the experience?
I mean, it's always easier to see it and play with it, so we've got like demos online, you can go on YouTube and see what it actually looks like, but essentially every day when you so we have a feed, it's kind of like a Facebook feed, if you will, full of nudges, and nudges are usually a piece of content, so it could be a video from your CEO saying, hey guys, we're launching a new, I don't know, we do a lot of work with telcos, so we're launching a new smartphone, watch this video to figure out kind of the new features. The next day we might nudge them on, you know, what the content of that video is. So, you know, what is the best new feature of this new device? A couple days later, you know, we might give them the information on how much it costs to sell, you know, the phone and the associated plans. But essentially, it's all about taking a big initiative, whether it's a launch of a new product or the launch of a new customer experience initiative, and turning it into small little bite-sized pieces of content that employees can digest and use in their day-to-day.
Tell us about some of these success stories. How have you seen this team sort of building app benefit companies? Yeah, so there's kind of 2 components. I always, you know, forget to mention so much about the software, but every time an employee interacts with the application, they get points and rewards. So they kind of have this real-time score of how well they're doing, which is great for managers to kind of look across their whole team to say, you know, who knows what they need to know and who knows what they need to know and who doesn't. And if you have a lower score, then your managers can intervene and help you out. But essentially, the reason that a lot of our customers choose to purchase Nudge after they try it is every time they use the software and they're focused on a launch of a new product or a new initiative, we can see the results speak for themselves. So working with one of the telcos, they launched Nudge to half their team. The half that had Nudge had an increase of sales of about 46% in their first month. So like some pretty dramatic numbers in the world of telco. In food service, so we work with a ton of restaurants as well. We've seen lift in different products that could be anywhere from 7 to 10% in a month, which is like staggering in the world of food service. So how long ago was when you first brought Nudge to a company to try for the first time, and what was that process like? Because I think for a lot of people, that starting customer, that starting client, getting the ball rolling, it can be very intimidating. So what was that process like for you?
So one of the first customers we had, as I've mentioned, I was consulting. And so we were working with a pretty large hospitality provider. And I had said to them, like, listen, we just created this huge plan and we have no way of actually implementing it. I'm thinking of working on a side project where I would build a mobile app that would allow you to directly connect with your frontline team. And, through that we could, connect with them directly, give them rewards for participating, and really get a sense of, what they're doing or what they're thinking on the day-to-day. And the CEO of this company said, yeah, that's great. If you build that, I think that would be a huge asset for our company. We'd love to use it. And in fact, I'll give you $10,000 towards building it, and I'll be your first customer. And so I'll actually, give you a bit of money to start going with. I was like, oh my God, $10,000! I could totally build you all kinds of mobile software and a back-end system with analytics. I probably have extra money to take a trip. I had no idea. I didn't get into my background, but first-time entrepreneur. I've never taken a business class, which now I have. But I didn't study business at all. I found this problem and felt really strongly about solving it. And so, anyways, it now is costable. Now we've raised $9.5 million, so it costs a lot more than $10,000. But that was really one of those early signals that validated, yes, this is a problem, yes, somebody would be willing to pay for it, and then I just had to go find a bunch of other people to do the same thing.
And you were telling me that stat that you've raised $9 million, you are the first female duo in Canada?
Yeah, so my business partner and I, now we're 3 co-founders, but in the early days it was myself, and then I met a really incredible woman who's my co-founder and our CTO, and her and I joined up. And there's not a lot, there's not a ton of female CEOs in tech in general. Less than 5% of tech companies in Canada have female CEOs. And the number to have a CEO and a CTO duo co-founder pair is even much less. So yeah, the 2 of us went off to go raise our Series A last year, and then we closed it. And then a lot of people, we were getting calls from journalists being like, "Oh wow, we've never seen a female CEO and CTO raise this much money before." And I was like, "Really? That's not good."
Yeah, exactly. So talk about those early days starting things up. You graduated from university or undergrad. You also did grad school. What was it like sort of starting a business right out of school, maybe with some student debt? What did that sort of look like for you?
It's terrible. I think being an entrepreneur I went in eyes wide closed. People are going in eyes wide open. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And so I encourage a lot of first-time entrepreneurs to really do their research, to attend events, to really get a sense of what it's like, because it's so all in and it's really difficult, and it just takes a ton of determination and perseverance, and it's constantly a test of figuring new hard things out. But all that to say, I graduated my undergrad, then I went back to school, then I got a job consulting, and my parents were like, finally, you've gone to school for 7 years, now you can make some money. And so then I was consulting, and then I found this problem kind of a year and a half in, and so I started working on it on the side while I was, consulting full time. And consulting was great for starting a business because I was traveling all the time, so I had nights alone. All my other friends were living downtown, going for dinners all the time, and I was in the middle of nowhere, figuring out what goes into business plan and what is a total addressable market, and figuring all those things out. So yeah, I just kind of started it slowly on the side, found some more validation, started trying to figure out what does the first version look like, trying to get a little more money into the company because I had to hire someone to build the first version because I have no technical chops. And it was a long, bumpy road.
Is that intimidating, being somebody? Oftentimes, I think people think when there's tech, you have to be the person who's creating the technology to work in the tech space. Was that intimidating at all? If you're not the person who directly maybe has that experience of building the app?
I mean, I find most things intimidating, so. But I really, coming back to the root of why I wanted to start this business, when I worked consulting, and I've also worked in retail, and I've also worked in food service, and I've been in those positions where you don't have the digital tools and you're not connected, and I just felt so strongly that needed to exist, that I was willing to kind of push through all of those things that made me feel kind of awkward or uncomfortable or were outside of my wheelhouse. So what I did was I started going to startup weekends to just meet people who were starting businesses, and I wasn't even pitching our idea. I was just sitting in the audience listening to other people pitch, and then joining teams to help other people build their businesses, to be what goes into this. I started doing like online entrepreneurship courses. So Mars, out of Toronto, at the time had a course called Entrepreneurship 101, which they still have. And in fact, back then, 5 years ago, it was in person. And so I used to like go every week and sit in the audience and talk to people and try and just get a sense of like, what is this community? How do I meet people? And I just like continued to find ways to like insert myself into the scene, and it worked out because in the end I ended up meeting my business partner, who's our CTO, and her and I then worked tirelessly for like a year and a half, 2 years without pay, and like sharing a desk at the DNC or anywhere, like give us a desk for free. And then we actually had our first version together, and we started getting some more customers. So things got better at that point.
So speaking of team, like you've built something that encourages and fosters teamwork. How does your company work as a team, and how is it with now 3 different sort of co-founders? Like, what does that dynamic look like?
Yeah, so just stepping back on finding co-founders and getting the right initial team, I think the most important part of a company and building something from the ground up is who you're doing it with, and making sure you've got kind of complementary skill sets and you're sharing a vision. And like finding good co-founders is critical, because it's just, for me it was anyways, because it's very hard building something from nothing, and you need other people that are in it with you that have that same level of commitment. And that means sharing the equity, and like, I was going to say sharing whatever little money you have in the early days, but for us that was 0 money, so we all don't get paid. But I think for me, when I was trying to find co-founders, I obviously needed a technical co-founder. We're a software business. But the other piece that I really wanted to find was somebody who had built and grown companies before. So I found, kind of just through networking, randomly met somebody who had started and sold 3 or 4 businesses in the past. He'd exited his last one. He'd just come back from traveling around the world and was like ready to get his hands dirty in something. I was like, oh, I need you, like somebody who understands this journey, somebody who, gets what we're about to do, and also really feels strongly about the problem that we're solving. So that was kind of the initial founding team, and it was just the 3 of us plus 1 developer for the first probably 2.5 years. Because the first year and a half, we were kind of building. Some of that was on the side while I was consulting. Then we came out and we went to an once we kind of had our first product together and had it in the hands of a couple of customers, we decided to go and apply for an accelerator. So one of these kind of typical accelerators, you spend, a couple of months, they give you $50,000, they take 6% of your company, and we went through that together. And then coming out of that, we actually went and raised some capital, and that's when the team started to like grow like crazy. And grow like crazy, not just because of the capital that we brought into the company, but the people that we brought into the company with the capital. So salespeople, marketing people, developers, they just started to make the engine work. So it was more people going out to market, trying to find customers, getting customers, and then us kind of growing organically from there.
So let's talk about raising capital for a moment. I think you have some really good experience to share with everybody. You've used a number of different formats, bootstrapping, angel investment. How did you go about raising the capital for your business?
Yeah, so as mentioned, the very early days, we tried to get people to prepay, and I think that's like, building a business is not about raising capital. Building a business is about building a business, and you have to find the resources to support you along the way. For the style of business we wanted to run, we knew we needed to bring in a lot of capital fast, but it's so hard raising money. And the bar for raising money is quite high, because there's a lot of awesome companies coming out of Canada right now. And so, we don't have a ton of investors, and we've got a lot of bright entrepreneurs building things that matter. So for us, we honestly, in the early days, we're like, we're not even going to raise capital. We're just going to do this without. And so we went through that accelerator. We came out, and we realized, based on what was happening in our market, we needed to go a lot faster. We needed to hire more salespeople than money we had in the bank. And so we went out and we did an angel round. So our first round of financing was, I think, like $1.2 million. And man, it was super tough. Like, figure out how to pitch investors, which was in and of itself a difficult thing. And then it's not just about pitching investors. It's like you've got to get into the room with people that kind of have a background in your industry. I was just talking to Sherry a bit about this because I have a bunch of angel investors from Peterborough and from Ajax and Waterloo. And, you know, I was fortunate in finding investors who had either been a part of retail in the past, so they understood the problem, or they'd started and built software businesses. So, you know, you have to get into a room, you have to connect with people, they have to understand your vision. There's like so many parts there that need to go right. And it's kind of a game of numbers. Like it's just about putting yourself out there as much as possible and trying to get the word out. And so as I was doing that, we also had our first institutional investor come to the table, which was RBC. And they had just put together a new fund, and just by, again, like showing up to an event where there was wine, I ended up like, you know, meeting somebody who was just launching a new fund, and then, you know, he's like, I'm gonna put $250 in, and I was like, okay, that's like the first big chunk of money somebody has said they would give me. And so, you know, you use that to go back to the angels and say, now, you know, if somebody's willing to give me $250, you guys, you know, you want to give me like 20, 25, and there was a lot of that, and it took me probably a year to raise that first 1.2 million. So while that's happening, you know, my other two co-founders are working on getting more customers and building the product and, you know, the team. And
love that conversation. I'd be like, $250? Thanks! That's awesome!
Yeah, no, it costs a lot of money to start and grow a company, especially downtown Toronto. Like the war for talent is real. So I'm so excited we've got this new office. But like right next to me is Shopify, who's building this like 20-story thing, and I was like out for a the other day, and I was like, you know, I'm feeling really good about my new office, even though I don't have desks. And then I just like look at this huge building going up next to me, like, oh, that's gonna make things difficult.
One step at a time. We'll get there.
Yeah.
What does a typical day in the life currently look like for you? What are some of the tasks that fill your day? Projects on the go?
Yeah, I mean, every day is so different, but right now, I mean, the job of the CEO is honestly like to do all the things that need to get done that people often don't want to do in the early days. So yesterday that was like, I don't know, figuring out where garbage cans go and like building furniture and like taking out the recycling and then like going into a meeting with a board member and then having a customer come in. And they were like, where are your doors? I think, you know, now that the company is growing to, we're going to be 30 people in the next kind of week, I now have a pretty solid management team. So we now have a COO and, you know, we have a CFO and I have a head of sales and a head of product. So now my time is spent on really different things, whereas in the early days I was kind of doing a lot of those things, like whether it's paying people or, you know, working on our balance sheet or prepping, you know, our financial forecast. Now we kind of we've got some pretty tremendous talent around the table that's doing those things, although I'm still going to be really actively involved in that. But now I'm finding I'm spending a lot of my time on hiring, so you know, finding the right people to bring into the company. I do a lot of strategic planning, so what are we trying to do this year, next year, 5 years from now? Obviously we have quite a few investors, so I do a lot of the investor relationships, handling the board, a lot of like figuring out what teams need, how can we, you know, better support them. But it's a lot of context switching, you know? Like,
yes.
It's every day is like something new and something interesting, and that's the beauty, but also the challenge. And
you're growing so fast, right? So it's changing, and I think like even if you look at your year-to-year progressions, it's probably like what you're doing now is completely different than what you were doing a year ago.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think, and that's where like being an entrepreneur is interesting, because in the early days you're just like, I've got to build this thing, and then next thing you know you're like, oh, I'm like a leader in this company, and like I need to send myself on like some kind of leadership development path for myself so I can figure out like how to be a CEO. Like, you know, when you're a CEO, it's a pretty flat company at the end of the day. Like, you know, anybody, totally open concept. I talk to everybody on my team every day. But, you know, you start to get to a point where, like, I interviewed somebody yesterday and they were like, I'm just so nervous to meet you. I was like, what? Why? I'm nervous to meet you. So, you know, I'm starting to recognize that now it's more about, like, leading the company as opposed to, like, building. And so that's, like, my next thing I've got to figure out.
And what is your big vision? Like, what is that leadership direction that you kind of have in mind? Like, is there Oftentimes you'll hear maybe entrepreneurs talk about sort of like a core message or a core vision or something that sort of is at the heart of what they're seeking to build.
Yeah.
What does that look like for you?
I mean, you're coming back to the early part of the discussion, for us, our vision is to completely transform the way the non-desk workforce communicates and performs. So when I say non-desk workforce, that's any employee who doesn't sit at a desk, who doesn't have a computer, who doesn't have access to email. Like that is, we want to create digital tools that they have in their pocket on their smartphone to help them do their job better every day. And that's a pretty big goal because there are hundreds of millions of those frontline workers, and so that's what we're striving to do. And along the way, that's our mission. Like when I often, investors always ask you tricky questions early on when they're getting to know you, and they're just like, do you want to sell your company for this much money or this much money? And for us, it's more about, we want to build a great company that addresses that problem, and obviously we'll make money along the way, but the desire has never been like, we need, to sell this thing for several $100 million, although that would be nice. And that's definitely a direction that we want to go. But for us, it's more about addressing that root problem. And, as a result, like late nights and early mornings and just all of the demands that come with being an entrepreneur, if you're really deeply rooted in that vision, like it'll drive you through all of those tough times.
Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you have a really strong core team kind of running the business, and you're talking about hiring kind of quickly, you're building, you're growing rapidly. What are some of the skills that you look for when you are hiring talent to join?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. So just to come back to the issue of hiring, it's very hard to find good people, but also there are so many incredibly talented good people, you just have to find them. And so for us, that means we interview and go for coffees with a lot of people to get a sense of who they are and what they're looking for and what kind of dent do they want to make in the world. But we're starting to get to a point now where we're hiring more people that have kind of gone through this journey of, how do you expand into the US in a really rapid way? How do you hire people there? But for the first 20 people in the company, it was more about who are you? What do you care about? What drives you? And it was about finding those people that were really determined and passionate and curious and just willing to figure it out. I didn't care whether or not I hired someone to run our marketing department that had never done marketing before, because she's just I'm reading a lot about this. And in the early stages, I was like, some marketing's better than no marketing. Currently, we have no marketing. And she was the right price. And now she's grown with the company, and now she's got an incredible skill set, but she was just super hungry, super passionate. She also followed up with me every day for a month. I was like, I just don't have money to pay you yet. But for us, it's a lot more about attitude and aptitude and a willingness to figure things out, because in a rapidly changing environment, those are the things that will make you successful. And then we also look for people that like to have fun. They don't take themselves too seriously. And I think we've built a very special culture at Nudge, and it's something that a lot of people come into our company and they're just like, how do you guys make this place like this? And I'm like, I don't know, it's just always kind of been it's always been like this. And I asked one of our developers that the other day, and he was like, first of all, I've never been in a company with 70% women before in a tech company. This is crazy. Whether that's our leadership team or our dev team or our marketing team, I think because we have a lot of women leaders, we attract a lot of women into the company. But also he said to me, there's such an openness and transparency amongst this culture. So we do a lot, communication is huge for us. We have team meetings twice a week with our team, Tuesday mornings, and that's where we have a stand-up talk about what customers we're launching, what pieces of the product are going live, mentioning new hires. And then every Friday we hold a team cheers where someone either presents something that they did with a customer, or we do a product demo, but we constantly find ways to create understanding across the different teams. And then we also do quarterly reviews of what's happened and what's going to happen, because all of the parts of a tech company are so different, but in order to really reach a goal together, we need to understand and appreciate the highs and lows of everybody else's gig, and so we spend a lot of time on that. And sometimes people are like, there's almost too much communication. I'm like, at this point, I'd rather there be too much than too little.
Any fun, like Cupcake Fridays or any of those sort of team building?
Oh yeah, I mean, actually I just wrote a blog post on this. We did a team retreat. So my two best friends, who by the way, when I quit my consulting job, sent me job postings like every single day because they were like, Lindsey doesn't have a job. And I'm like, no, I do, I'm starting my own thing. And they were just like, oh, somebody's got to pay for Lindsey's dinner tonight. Anyways, and they actually ended up quitting their jobs and becoming entrepreneurs, and they bought a motel, like this dingy motel up in Prince Edward County, and then they renovated it from the ground up, and I was there like wallpapering on the weekends every once in a while, and so they hosted us for our first team retreat. And it was such an incredible experience for me to be away with my team for 2 days and just hear, like, I obviously have hopes and dreams for this company, and so does my co-founders, but then I talked to like every person on my team, and they were like talking to me about like our vision for like in 5 years, in 10 years, and I was just like, oh my God, like it was so invigorating to just get a sense of how they were all dreaming about the company, and that was one of those things where I was just like, we've got to do this every year, and it was pretty cool.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to just open up to the floor in just a moment. I wanted to ask one more question. They say that being an entrepreneur is not for the faint of heart, maybe an understatement. How has being an entrepreneur changed your life? And I think like in comparison, you see maybe your friends working more traditional jobs, traditional routes. How's it affected you?
You know, I told you earlier, in the early days, there's all kinds of sacrifices, and stopped like highlighting my hair and like getting manicures and all those things that like I used to do when I was consulting and like, eat a lot more craft dinner. So there's a bit of a lifestyle switch, but honestly, there's been a few things that have just completely transformed my view of life. Like, and those things are, you can kind of set your mind to do anything, and then you just have to do it, and it requires a lot of perseverance, and you need to be really determined, and you have to keep a good attitude throughout the whole period. But like really, if you can dream it, you can do it. It is something I really believe in, because I just never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, and here I am. But it is a ton of hard work. And then the other thing that I find very spectacular about starting a company, especially in Canada and in this environment, is there are so many people who are willing to help and people who are really gunning for you to be successful, and it just like always amazes me how many amazing, incredible, talented people are out there that are willing to help you along the way. And so that just always makes me feel really, good about life and people in general. So, and then my like closing advice is if you're thinking about doing something, like do it. Like no matter how it goes, you're going to learn so much.
Lindsey's giving you a nudge. Get it? I just feel like puns would come up all the time in your office. Yeah. Nudging you along. Anyway, I'd be a distraction. I'd like to open it up to the floor at this time if anybody has any questions that they'd like to ask Lindsey. Yeah.
I'm allowed now. Can you hear me? Oh, God. Oh, you're recording. Hi. I did a ton of change management actually in the gaming industry.
Cool.
So I don't know if you've targeted them yet specifically, but there is a massive, massive market there, because the same thing, you're doing this massive redesign of an organization and you have no way to reach people that are working on the floor. Mm-hmm. So if you haven't considered gaming, that is a huge industry that would be so grateful to have a product like this, to be able to engage their staff on gaming floors across countries, across provinces. It would be a really great market for you. It was absolutely necessary. That was something a nut you couldn't crack, because they didn't have access to computers on a regular basis. You couldn't communicate key messages. It all had to filter down, and by the time it got down to the people on the floor, it was nonsense making, right? Like they couldn't coordinate the information effectively. So anyway, just a thought, because a couple of years ago I would have wanted nudge desperately. Yeah. So,
well, if you know anyone.
Oh, I do actually. I'll give you my card later and tell you.
Yeah. No, that'd be awesome.
Connections. There we
go.
Great
Canadian gaming.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Had you considered gaming before?
Like, as we kind of come back to that vision of the whole non-desk workforce that would fit in there, the reason we decided to focus on retail and food service is we actually, in the early days, I tried this across all kinds of non-desk environments to see where we had the most success. It was tricky though, because usually when you run those experiments in the early days of your company, you expect to get one result and then be like, that's what we're doing. but it came back and all of them were successful. So I actually have a couple of customers in mining and manufacturing and these other industries from those early tests. But the reason we focused on food service and retail is we could really focus on programs that drove a lift in revenue and quickly. And so it was pretty easy for us to say, listen, we know we've driven hundreds of thousands of dollars of business for you in this 1 month, which really helped our pricing model as well. And that's where we decided to double down. And it's also massive.
That's excellent.
So.
Hi, you mentioned about your office culture a little bit, and
Yep.
I just wanted to know if you had a vision of the office culture that you wanted, and you made that happen, that office culture.
Yeah, office culture, nudge culture. We actually have. This is maybe cheesy to say in this kind of environment, but we have a nudge vibes committee, which is. Honestly, over half my team is on this committee, and it's our culture committee, which kind of speaks to it in and of itself. But we meet every 2 weeks, and we talk about different things going on in the company, everything from onboarding to team events to how is communication going. It's a great way for us to get a pulse of what's happening, and we have a rotating chair. So one of our interns right now is the chair. So she's doing our second internship, and she's playing a leadership role in that. But that's kind of where we talk about it. But outside of that, in the early days, we kind of had our founding principles, our founding values, which we developed with our core team. We revisit those when we're away at our retreats and at a regular cadence throughout the year, and find ways to kind of showcase people living those values. And they're huge. They're displayed on our wall as soon as they will be displayed on our new office. They were displayed on our old office. I haven't got there yet. But I envision a future where we continue to attract talent who see Nudge as an opportunity to grow themselves professionally and make a huge impact, and have a lot of fun while they do it. And I think to do that, we need to have great managers and great professional development plans for everyone. And there's so many moving parts to it, but I think the best way to kind of develop a culture is to be a contributing part of that, and every person on our team really is.
Great. More questions for Lindsey?
Hi, Lindsey. So I'm a little story. I met Lindsey at the Peterborough Regional Angel Network when I was out probably doing a little bit what Lindsey does, getting out to meet stakeholders and customers. So I was up to meet the angel investors in Peterborough so I could learn a little bit more what they do. And Lindsey happened to be coming back to that meeting to sort of do an update on what was going on with their investment. And so one of the things that really made me very endeared to her very quickly is she came in and we had just gone through a whole bunch of very serious pitches by men. And they were up there pitching the angels, trying to get money out of their pocket. And Lindsey and her co-founder came in and they poured themselves a glass of wine. They went up to the front of the room and just killed it. And I remember thinking to myself, see, this is how it's done, right? I mean, not only did they build culture in the room immediately upon arriving, but it was just such a dynamic and engaged rapport between the angels and Lindsey and her co-founder. So I knew that we had to get her here so we could hear her speak. My question to you is around angel investment. How has bringing investment into your company, has it changed things, put extra pressure? Everybody talks about getting smart money, not just any money, but you don't know that when you're first starting out. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many parts to raising capital. So first of all, if you're raising capital, you should understand, do you really need to raise capital? And there's all kinds of really great blogs and especially VCs out of Silicon Valley. They have incredible blogs, and I go to a conference every year called SaaStr where they profile all of these great authors and thinkers on the space. So if you're thinking about raising money, I would start by just reading about it. But for us, what's amazing about angel investors, these are people who have been successful in their own right and they're reinvesting their capital, their own capital, versus venture capital where there's funds of $100 million, $200 million, and somebody who's never been an entrepreneur is investing in you based on their fund's thesis. So angel investors, I think, are incredible because they have a lot of passion for starting and building. And in those early phases, I remember our first angel investor, he was like, basically consider me a part of your team. Like, I will come to your office and I will do work for you. And I was like, for how much? And he's like, for free. And I was like, come on over. And so he helped us, figure out like, how do we service our first customer? Like, that's the phase where he was coming in, because we'd had this customer for 6 months, and I was like, we've got to figure out how to grow from here. But all that to say that these early angels can really give a lot back if you want them to, right? Like, it was up to me to say, hey, yes, we want your help. Please come help us. But then that was kind of the first bit of angel money. Then when we got closer to that $1.2 million mark, it was more about how do I actually actively manage bigger groups of investors. I probably have at least 30 angel investors in the company. So when I went back to Peterborough, part of the reason I was so cheery is like, I love going back to Peterborough. It's just a really nice place. But also, I already had the capital into the company, so I wasn't as nervous. And also, I'm an entrepreneur and there's free wine, so. And my co-founder is drowning. I know, I drink a lot of wine. I do. It's like, honestly, how I get through this. It's not that true. I also run a lot. You gotta like balance it all out. But, I think the thing to note is when you take capital, those investors are expecting a return. Angel investors are expecting 3 to 5 times whatever they put back into your company. Now I have institutional investors. They're expecting at least a 10 times return. Some of them are 15 times return. So it's all about, like, as soon as you get that money, it's kind of like filling your gas tank up. It's like, okay, I've got, like, here's a bunch of fuel. I need to go hard. I need to go fast before the tank is empty and get the company to the next stage. So you really have to know what you're getting yourself into. You need to have a really good sense of what those milestones are that you need to hit within, certain time frames, and you need to be really honest with the investors that you're bringing in around what those are, because they're going to hold your feet to the fire on that for sure. And if not, then bad things happen.
What did you study in school?
Anthropology and Geography. I did a double major. So. Yeah. So I was always very passionate about the intersection of people and places. So I went to university. My parents were like, start general, figure out what's interesting to you. And then I started going down the path of like bioarchaeology. And they're just like, what are you going to do with that? Like, I don't know, paleontology or something. And anyways, I ended up getting more into culture and anthropology. I started spending more time in geography. I actually ran a bunch of nature camps out this way in the summers as I went to high school here. And I've always wondered why, some people treat their environment one way and some people treat it another way. And then I went traveling, and then I got a very global view of that. And while I was traveling, actually, I was volunteering in Argentina for a few months with an inner city group. But Tom's Shoes was our first sponsor. And they were like, we need somebody to figure out this sponsorship and figure out, we were doing this event at Christmas time, and they were going to give shoes to all of the inner city youth. And they were like, can you handle this? I was like, I showed up here 2 days ago. You want me to handle your biggest partnership ever? Like, okay. All that to say, when I was doing that, I started to learn about corporate responsibility, corporate social responsibility. I came back from that trip being like, this is what I want to do. I went back to Ryerson. They just launched Canada's first sustainability program. I focused on corporate responsibility. Coming out of that, I got into consulting, and now I ended up here. So, being an entrepreneur wasn't really on the radar at all, and here I am.
Okay, I'm going to ask one. One of the things we always get, Lindsay, is startups that are thinking they've got the best idea, they go back and they remake it, and they remake it, and they remake it before they start to go out to sell it. So it sounds like you kind of hacked together an idea, got the $10,000, and then started to sell it. How did you find those first few customers? Just put some Facebook ads up and it was done?
No. 0 Facebook ads. Actually, my marketing team trying those for the first time right now, and I was like, I'm not sure. But because I was consulting and in this space, I went and talked to a bunch of people I was consulting with the permission of my employer at the time. I was like, hey, they all understood. Like, I talked to the CEO of the consulting firm I was with and said, hey, I've recognized this as a problem. Is it okay if I talk to a couple of our clients about this idea, because I'm trying to get a sense of whether or not this could work? And she was like, yeah, sure. Like, I think she was like Lindsey's not going to start a tech company. It's fine. And then it kind of snowballed from there. But, it was interesting because I had such an insider view of the pain points. I think I had it gave me a different view of the problem. I also knew what kind of budgets all of those companies had to support problems like this because I was consulting in this space, which was also really helpful. And then I didn't want to bias my thinking around validating the problem by only talking to people I knew. So I did cold outreach on LinkedIn. I asked for intros, from people I knew to say hey, do you know anybody in store operations or sales operations that I can talk to, so I can understand is this something that's real? Because I think that validation phase is so critically important, and I almost wish I wish I did way more of it, because I needed to figure out price points, to figure out buyers, to figure out how they buy. I didn't know it was going to take, especially in the early days. Some of our deals took 12 months or 18 months to close. That is so long when you don't have any money in the bank. Please just buy this now. Yeah, I had a few of those moments. To be fair, we've now shortened the sales cycle a lot. It's we just closed a deal in 3 months, which is our shortest deal ever. So our messaging has evolved, and now we have customers to point to that make it all a lot easier. But yeah, does that kind of answer?
Thank you. It's been very interesting. Can you talk a little bit about the competitive environment you're in and how you interact or don't with your competitors?
Yes, we have competitors, and they all have a lot more money than us, so it keeps me up at night. It's interesting. In the very early days, I didn't see a lot of competitors for this space. I started this company 5 years ago, and to give some context, 5-6 years ago, a lot of people were still using BlackBerries. Our first app was on a BlackBerry. Now we don't have a BlackBerry app. But all of that to say, it just wasn't the super common solution, because in the retail or food service environment, head offices weren't thinking I can use mobile as a way to connect with my frontline team. Now these large organizations are saying, yes, we know our employees are using their mobiles while they're at work. They all have WhatsApp groups and they're talking to each other, which comes with all kinds of liability. But back then there wasn't really competitors. Fast forward to where we are now, there's 4 or 5 competitors that I see increasingly coming up in sales discussions. So my customers or prospects will say, what about this company, or how are you different? We are different. We've always been really mindful of what we're trying to do, and we use a lot of nudge theory and behavioral science in how we engage our frontline employees, which is very different than some of the other solutions out there. But with that said, with a lot of money, and one of my competitors has raised about $30 million, so that just allows them to go faster at bringing in salespeople and building product. You always have to come back to what are your core differentiators, and for us that's kind of on the theory of how we build and design campaigns. It's in kind of how the whole app comes together for the end user. But it's okay to have competitors. In the early days I was I don't want anybody else doing this. But then you're am I crazy because I'm the only one doing this? And then you start to see people come into the space, and you just have to figure out how to be better or faster. Or I also came to this realization, it's okay for us to have competitors because there are hundreds of millions of frontline employees, and we can't own every single one of those customers. So that's kind of a whole bunch of different points of view on that. But going through investor due diligence, getting capital from these different investors, they would go and do competitive scans, and they would even find new companies that I'd never heard of before coming out of, different places in the world. So they say at any one point there are at least 12 companies working on the same idea. At least.
Oh my goodness.
Turn it back over to you, Katie, to finish it off.
Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about mentorship and understand if that's been a part of your journey. Have you had any mentors along the way, and what has that relationship looked like?
So many. So many mentors. I think it's really important as a first-time entrepreneur to find people that have gone through the journey before that can help and support you along the way, because you're figuring it all out. It's all really tough. For us, I think I mentioned this to you the other day, my first advisor that I found, I went to Mars, and as I was showing up to that Entrepreneurship 101 class every week and like finding people to ask questions to, there was one person who worked for Mars who was always there, and I went and talked to him every week, and I was like, I did this and this, and I ran into this problem, and eventually he's like, do you want to get coffee? I was like, yes, I've been waiting for you to like spend time with me and go for coffee. And then him and I ended up becoming, really, really close as I was building the company. Everything from like what goes into my first really big contract to, what do I look for in my first customer success hire? Like he was a part of all of those different pieces of the company's journey. And he's somebody who I went to at the high points of the company and somebody I went to at the low points. But he was always just like, he was outside of the company. He was an advisor, so he wasn't as obviously emotionally invested, but he, because of the history, he had a good sense of what we were trying to do, so it always really grounded me in those discussions. And about a month ago, he actually joined us as our COO. So he left Mars to become our Chief Operating Officer. And I was just like, oh my God, all my dreams are coming true. Like for the last 5 years, I've been like, will you come work with us? Will you come work with us? He's like, Lizzie, you just show up here and talk to me about your problems like every month, and now I just like want to come work with you. But in the end, he did, and now he sits next to me, which is so great because I can just like turn to him and say like, I have this problem. And he's like, I know, we both have that problem, and here's what he needs to do. So he was like one in particular, but I have a whole bunch of other people that I've sought out. And I think the biggest thing with mentorship is you have to be a good mentee. And I mentor a couple of people as well, and when I think one of the biggest, most important jobs of the mentee is to go for advice and then do something with it and then follow up, because you want to get advisors and mentors that become really invested in what you do. So they need to be in the loop as they're giving you their time and their effort. So, but I'd say like surround yourself with as many smart people as you possibly can, whether they're working with you or you're buying coffee or buying wine.
We're entering into that sort of rapid fire, wrapping it up sort of piece. So I want to know the best piece of advice you've ever received and the piece of advice that you would give to your younger self starting out.
Best piece of advice. I think my dad, he always tells me to go for a run. And I actually think being really like physically active as you're going through this journey is important, and it's often the first thing to go, but it gives you a bit of a clear head, it gives you positive endorphins, and you need both of those things to successfully run the business. Physical and emotional health are critical to you performing your best. So that, and then my best friend's like, don't go for a run, drink wine, so
balance.
So one of those, and the other piece is just surround yourself with bright people.
Amazing. Last question for you. What is up and coming? What does the next 1 year and the next 5 years look like in your mind and your vision for Nudge?
In the next year, I'd like to hit a new revenue milestone in the business, which is about $5 million. So that's what I'm totally focused on right now. And in the next 5 years, hopefully I get to sell this thing and travel the world. No, that's totally counter to what I said to you guys earlier. I think it's coming back to like we want this to be in the hands of hundreds of millions of employees across the globe. We're very focused on North America, and we have a couple of customers in the UK, but I can see that like I want to build a global company. Like I want to have, I think all of us at Nudge, like we want to be solving this problem in a really global way, and I think Toronto and I think Canada is a great place to grow a global company, and we get really well respected and really well treated around the world. And so that's really our goal, is to build an amazing company that impacts millions of people and have some fun along the way.
Very good. Well, very inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing and just the vulnerability and the story. Big round of applause. Thank you so much, Lindsey, for being here tonight. Thank you. Are you hanging around for a bit?
Yeah.
She's hanging around for a bit. If you have more questions, talk to her. Next month's Startup Grind event is on?
To be determined.
To be determined. Check out Spark Center website and our social media pages and hashtag Startup Grind Durham Region. Thanks very much for coming out, everybody.
Great hug. That was awesome.
You were awesome. That was so funny. All the stories.
Thank you very much. What was the consulting company you worked for?
It's called Laura. They're like a small little boutique. Yeah.
Way to get yourself started. Let me stick behind them.